Welcome to another sparkling edition of Beeb Watch. This is the show where we put the state broadcaster under the microscope and give it the TalkTV treatment. And remember, I'm watching the BBC, so you don't have to. For more than 20 years, Andrew Marr was a stalwart of the BBC as the political editor. He was a household name. He went on for 16 years to present his famous programme on Sunday morning, his eponymous programme, The Andrew Marr Show, where he interviewed world leaders, prime ministers, heads of state, but he was extremely good at his job. But of course, everybody at the BBC, particularly those who work in the political arena, have to be very careful about what they say, because the BBC allegedly is obsessed with its impartiality, its unbiased approach to reporting. And so all of its journalists, indeed other people who work for the corporation, are not allowed to express their opinions, particularly on air. So for more than 20 years, Andrew Marr had to hold his counsel. He couldn't say what he thought, because those are the BBC rules. So now that he's quit the BBC and moved to some radio station, I can't remember the name of it, what's it called, LCB or something like that. Nobody listens, it's rubbish. He's moved to LBC, that's it, where he does a daily show there. He said he wants to get his voice back so he can talk about climate change. We really need that, don't we? Somebody else droning on about climate change. Whoop-de-doo. However, he said that looking back on his period at the BBC is a nightmare. And I quote, he said, the rules guarding what people like him could and could not say were, and I quote, insane. To the extent that when he went to the pub with his friends and his family, he felt scared to say what he thought about anything. This is the madness of the BBC. It believes it's totally unbiased and totally unprejudiced because people like Andrew Marr can't tell people what they think. Well, it would be better if they could tell people what they thought, because that would be more honest, wouldn't it? I don't want to hear people from the BBC going, oh, well, Brexit was so wrong, it's such a bad decision. Well, if the BBC said what it thought in the lead up to the referendum vote, then maybe it would have got the result it wanted. Instead, it stood there not saying anything, and people voted for Brexit, and now they're moaning and moaning and moaning about it. The point is that this impartiality, unbiased obsession that the BBC has is ludicrous, juvenile, ridiculous, and it has to stop. It not only insults people like Andrew Marr, who are made to keep their mouths shut like children, it insults the viewers and the listeners. It insults our intelligence. These people up there on screen are not allowed to tell us what they think. It's childish and ridiculous, and it has to stop. Andrew Marr is now on that radio station. I keep forgetting the name again. What's it called? LBC. He said he wants to get his voice back. He's been repressed for too long. Well, I've heard his show on LBC. Why don't you go back to the BBC, Andrew? Then we won't have to listen to your boring voice anymore. Your opinions are dull. Ends. Ironically, while a very intelligent, brilliant political reporter like Andrew Marr was not allowed to talk, was not allowed to say what he thinks, some bloke who talks about the offside rule on Match of the Day has been granted special leave to say whatever he wants. And that is, of course, Gary Lineker, the former footballer, who only recently in March caused a real storm by tweeting that the government's policy, the Rwanda scheme policy, he likened it to 1930s Nazi Germany. They took him off air because of that. In the ensuing battle between the BBC bosses and Lineker, Lineker won. He's now allowed to tweet basically whatever he wants. Now, the thing is, he's not backwards in coming forwards when it's about loving himself. He loves himself a lot, old Gary. So guess what? He's flying to Rome soon to pick up an Amnesty International Award for human rights and sport. Do the two go together? Sport and human rights? Anyway, he's off to Rome to pick this award up for his advocacy of human rights and sport. Okay, great. I hope you like your gong, your medal, your trophy, whatever it is, Gary. But what exactly have you ever done for human rights, apart from post a lot of stupid, juvenile, teenage tweets? What exactly have you done? Why are you getting this award? Just because you go, oh, the Tories are like Nazis. You get an award for that? Anyway, it's going to embarrass the BBC yet again, and I don't know how much longer the state broadcaster is going to put up with this guy, because he beat them in this dispute about what he could and could not tweet. He's now allowed to tweet whatever he wants, and he's rubbing their noses in it, isn't he? He really, really is. So when he holds his trophy for human rights advocacy aloft, it will be like a punch in the face to Tim Davie and the BBC. How much longer is this guy going to be treated as a special case? Why is Gary Lineker allowed to say what he thinks, but Andrew Marr, a far more important voice politically, never was? That is the inherent absurdity of the state broadcaster that we're forced to pay £160 a year for, and if we don't, we go to jail. Absolutely ridiculous. We've got to stop paying the licence fee, and they've got to let everyone say what they want, not just Gary Lineker. Now, moving on, for extraordinary, disappearing up your own backside, corporate narcissism. Take a look at this.
Welcome to BBC Verify. Like you said, we are a team of investigative journalists here at the BBC, and the point of the team, as you said, is to verify video, to fact check, to counter disinformation, and to analyse really complex stories so we can get to the truth of what's going on.
Only the BBC could come up with this solution. We've set up a fact-checking outfit, and it's us. We're going to check ourselves. Great! Going to mark their own homework, mark their own notoriously biased homework. And we're supposed to go, oh, well, that's all right then, that must be good, really good facts. What a pompous organisation this is, that it really thinks we're going to buy this. What it should do is get a fact-checking organisation that's independent. It's no good checking your own homework. Rubbish, absolute rubbish. And finally, do you remember last week we focused on Sally Nugent, the BBC Breakfast host, who introduced an item on the Dam Busters raid, calling that famous feat of British brilliance and bravery infamous. Infamous means wicked and terrible. 53 RAF heroes laid down their life for their country in that raid, and Sally Nugent says it's infamous. A lot of people told me, oh, you're being a bit unfair, you know, it probably was just a slip of the tongue by Sally. Maybe a junior scriptwriter didn't quite understand the importance of the Dam Busters raid. Maybe. 12 hours later, that was 7 in the morning, 12 hours later, the outset of the flagship The One show at 7 p.m, have a little look and a little listen to the host, Jermaine Genus.
Plus today marks 80 years since the infamous Dam Busters raid. The infamous Dam Busters raid.
What a shame and a coincidence. Another slip of the tongue by a BBC host, and maybe another junior scriptwriter who didn't understand the importance of the Dam Busters mission. BBC seems to be full of people like that. Oh, let me ask you this though. Is it at the state broadcaster official policy to call the Dam Busters infamous? I think it is. What do you think? Well, that's it for this episode of Be Watch. We'll be back for another instalment next week. If you have any comments, if you agree with me or disagree with me, do write down what you think, and maybe you'd like to subscribe. And by the way, if you do, it's free, unlike the BBC. In the meantime, I'm off to watch another channel.